The woman sat in the middle of the clearing, in the middle of the forest, in the middle of the night. A chill breeze blew through the pine boughs and made the pale hairs on her forearms stand like miniature trees, barren of branches and leaves and life. Her eyes were wide, pupils darting from side to side at the slightest sound from beyond the range of her vision. She wore a sleeveless shirt that looked more like a simple tunic, and jeans that had faded so much the denim looked almost transparent, like her skin. Strands of her hair blew in the breeze, and she used one hand to wipe them away from her eyes, as if desperate to keep her vision clear so she could see into the night that surrounded her. She sat on the ground, amid the dusty dirt and pine needles. Her shoes, once sneakers of some forgotten brand, barely covered her feet properly, and her toes stuck through the tops of them while the broken laces had been knotted and retied with little effect. Fingers clawed at the ground, clenching and unclenching with the same frequency as her darting eyes. Her breathing was a train chugging down the track. But she had no idea what a train was. She'd been born far too late to ever have seen the giant behemoths flying down the abandoned and rusted rails that pockmarked the country now, skeletal reminders of a time when things were different, of a time before. She shifted in the dirt, and the metallic chain clinked as she did so. Links ran from the metal collar around her neck, fell down into the same dirt, and then traveled a short distance away to where a thick stump of wood jutted out of the earth, holding the other end of the chain to a rusted padlock. Without thinking, she tugged at it, but it was heavy, and she had no strength to pull it free from the post. She'd eaten little the past few weeks, scraps, really. Whatever he chose to give to her, enough so she could keep walking, little more. What was his name? She frowned. It didn't matter. He was a bastard, cruel, unwavering in his devotion to some grand ideal she didn't give a shit about. What sort of human would do what he did? What sort of human could? She tugged the chain again. Hearing it clink made her feel momentarily better. The clinking was a familiar sound. It comforted her. It reminded her the sun would rise again in a few hours. Safety. That was all she lived for now. Not the synthetic drugs that she'd been a slave to for years until he found her. She glanced down at the needle tracks on her arms. If she'd known what a ballpoint pen was, she might have connected them and been able to create some sort of strange graphic. She could have done the same thing with the ones on top of her feet, in between her toes. Cold. She shivered. The breezes blew stronger around her, and she rubbed her forearms, trying her best to calm the hairs standing up all over her skin. In a few hours, the warmth of the sun would make all this cold seem like a bad dream. A branch cracked, and she jerked her head toward the sound. She swallowed. Quiet. She must remain absolutely quiet. Movement. She caught a quick glimpse of something just beyond the range of her vision. It darted from shadow to shadow. Breathing. Was it hers? She wanted to cry out for help. But what help would possibly come? There was none. Another crack on the forest floor, this time closer. How was it able to move like that? It seemed to be able to jump from place to place without being seen, almost like it was invisible. She turned to the direction she heard the last sound, peering deep into the darkness, trying her best to make out any sort of detail. Nothing. She turned back and screamed even as the face materialized before her. It was tough to even know what she was looking at in those jumbled, panicked seconds. She saw a gaping maw filled with razor-sharp fangs jutting out of translucent gums, dripping with an ooze that resembled saliva, but stunk more like the thing had gargled with rotting flesh. The eyes were the worst. They reminded her of the same hunger she'd seen on the faces of other junkies back at the flophouse.